The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? When the impossible becomes undeniable, even the most logical minds must accept that reality is far stranger than any equation can predict. Deep Space Nine's sensors screamed warnings across every console on the ops deck. Commander Benjamin Sisko looked up from his morning reports as the station shuddered, red alert klaxons blaring through the corridors. "Report!" Sisko commanded, moving swiftly to the central display. Major Kira Nerys' fingers flew across her tactical console. "The wormhole is opening, but the readings are all wrong. Subspace distortions across 17 different frequency bands. Verterium particle emissions off the scale. On screen," Sisko ordered. The main view screen filled with the Bajoran wormhole's familiar blue-white vortex, but something was different. Lightning, actual lightning, crackled across the event horizon in colors that shouldn't exist. Violet. Crimson. A green so deep it seemed to pulse with living energy. Chief O'Brien's Irish brogue cut through the chaos. "Commander, I'm reading atmospheric disturbances forming in open space." "That's impossible. There's no atmosphere out there to disturb." "Apparently someone forgot to tell the laws of physics," Dax said from the science station, her trill spots darkening as she frowned at her readings. "Benjamin, the wormhole isn't just opening. Something's pulling matter through from the other side. Organic matter." The wormhole convulsed. A figure tumbled from its center, wreathed in storm clouds that had no business existing in the vacuum of space. Lightning forked from her outstretched hands, and wind in space, seemed to cradle her fall. Then the woman collapsed, and the impossible weather vanished as if it had never existed. "Beam her directly to the infirmary," Sisko said. "Odo, meet me there. Kira, I want a level 5 security field around the medical bay. Whatever she is, she just violated everything we know about physics." Dr. Julian Bashir stepped back from his patient, medical tricorder in hand, his expression somewhere between fascination and disbelief. The woman lay unconscious on the biobed, her white hair fanned across the pillow in striking contrast to her dark skin. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with bone structure that suggested African heritage, though Bashir knew instantly she wasn't from Earth, at least not any Earth in this universe. "Well, Doctor?" Sisko asked as he entered with Odo at his side. "She's human," Bashir said. "Or close enough that my instruments can't tell the difference. But Commander, her DNA." He pulled up a holographic display. "There are sequences I've never seen before. Inactive genes that have somehow been reactivated. Her neurological pathways show development in areas of the brain we don't fully understand." "A genetic augment?" Odo asked, his voice carrying that particular edge of suspicion he reserved for potential threats. "No," Bashir said carefully. "Augments have artificial modifications. This is natural. Evolutionary. As if she's the next step in human development." The woman's eyes snapped open. They were blue. Not the pale blue of Earth's northern peoples, but a brilliant, electric blue that seemed to hold the sky itself. She sat up in one fluid motion, and every light in the infirmary flickered. Static electricity raised the hair on everyone's arms. "Where am I?" Her voice was rich, accented, carrying an authority that made even Sisko straighten slightly. Then her gaze found the window showing the stars beyond, and something close to panic crossed her face. "Goddess, I'm in space. Enclosed space." Her breathing quickened. The lights flickered again, more violently. "You're safe," Sisko said, keeping his voice calm and level. "I'm Commander Benjamin Sisko. This is Deep Space Nine, a Federation starbase. You came through the Bajoran wormhole during some kind of spatial anomaly." "Federation?" She swung her legs off the biobed, and Bashir wisely didn't try to stop her. "I've never heard of it. What year is this? What planet?" "The year is 2373. Dax said from the doorway, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. You're in orbit of Bajorans, in the Alpha Quadrant. And you are. The woman's eyes narrowed as she processed this information. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier, though her hands trembled slightly. My name is Ororo Munroe. I'm from Earth. But clearly not your Earth. Another universe. Dax breathed. The wormhole must have created a dimensional rift. Incredible. How did you survive in open space? Odo asked bluntly. Our sensors detected you falling through vacuum without environmental protection. Ororo looked at her hands, then at each of them in turn. Sisko recognized that look, the weighing of trust, the calculation of how much to reveal. He'd made that same assessment countless times. I didn't survive despite the vacuum, she said finally. I survived because I controlled the atmosphere around me. I am what my people call a mutant. Homo superior. I can manipulate weather on a planetary scale. She raised one hand, and a miniature cloud formed above her palm. Lightning, no thicker than a thread, danced between her fingers. The scent of ozone filled the infirmary. Fascinating, Bashir whispered. Sisko stepped forward, keeping his body language open and non-threatening. Ms. Munroe, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Can you control this ability? Are you a danger to this station or its inhabitants? Ororo's expression hardened. I have spent my entire adult life mastering my powers, Commander. I led a team of mutants dedicated to protecting a world that feared and hated us. I have been worshipped as a goddess and learned the terrible responsibility that comes with such power. So yes, I can control it. But whether I'm dangerous depends entirely on whether you treat me as a person or a threat. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sisko met her gaze and saw something he recognized. The eyes of someone who had fought too many battles, made too many impossible choices, carried too much weight for too long. Then let me be clear, Sisko said. On this station you are a person first. Whatever else you might be, that comes second. But I'd appreciate it if you'd help us understand what happened. The wormhole doesn't normally pull people through from other dimensions. Ororo's shoulders relaxed slightly. Neither do I normally fall through cosmic tunnels. The last thing I remember, I was in Earth's upper atmosphere, calming a massive solar storm that threatened our communications grid. Then something pulled at me. At my power. It felt like the storm itself wanted me to follow. The prophets, Kira said quietly from behind Sisko. Everyone turned to look at the Bajoran Major. Her expression held an awe that Sisko rarely saw outside of Temple. The beings inside the wormhole. Kira explained to Ororo. Bajoran faith teaches they are our gods. They exist outside linear time. If they wanted you here, there's a reason. Ororo's laugh was bitter. I've been called a goddess before, Major. I've seen what faith can do. Both the beauty and the horror. If your prophets brought me here, they'd better have a good reason. I have a world of my own to protect. The station shuddered again. Red alert sirens wailed. O'Brien's voice crackled over the calm. Commander, we've got 3 Jem'Hadar warships dropping out of warp. They're hailing us. It's way on. Sisko's jaw tightened. On my way. Ms. Munroe, I'm afraid your introduction to our universe is about to get complicated. The Dominion isn't known for their hospitality. As they rushed toward Ops, Ororo kept pace easily, her movements graceful despite her apparent unfamiliarity with the station's corridors. Commander, she said quietly, I don't know your politics or your wars. But I do know tyrants when I see them. And I don't bow to tyrants. Sisko allowed himself a small smile. Then you'll fit right in, Ms. Munroe. Welcome to Deep Space Nine. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The view screen in Ops displayed Weon's unnervingly pleasant smile. The Vorta's pale features and calculating eyes studied Deep Space Nine's command crew with the detached interest of a scientist examining specimens. "Commander Sisko, how delightful to see you again," Weon said, his tone dripping with false warmth. "I do hope we haven't arrived at an inopportune moment. Our sensors detected quite the unusual energy signature emanating from your station. The Dominion's concern for our welfare is touching, Weon," Sisko replied, his voice flat. "But I'm afraid we're just conducting routine scientific research. Nothing that would interest the Dominion." "Oh, but I disagree." Weon's smile widened. "You see, our long-range sensors detected an anomaly in the wormhole 23 minutes ago. Atmospheric disturbances in open space. Lightning where no lightning should exist. The Founders are quite interested in phenomena that defy natural law." Ororo stood just behind Sisko's right shoulder, her expression carefully neutral. But Sisko could feel the tension radiating from her, the way the air pressure in ops had subtly shifted when Weon appeared on screen. "The wormhole produces many unusual readings," Dax interjected smoothly. "The prophets aren't exactly bound by our understanding of physics." "Quite true, Lieutenant," Weon acknowledged. "Which is why the Founders would very much like to conduct a joint investigation. I'm certain the Federation would appreciate Dominion cooperation in such matters. We could beam over a science team immediately." "Denied," Sisko said. "Deep Space Nine is Federation territory, and we don't require assistance." Weon's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. How unfortunate. The Founders do so dislike obstacles to the pursuit of knowledge. Perhaps. A bolt of lightning struck the view screen from inside ops. Sparks erupted from the display terminal, and Weon's image dissolved into static before the backup systems rerouted the connection. Every head turned toward Ororo. Her eyes had shifted to pure white, glowing with barely contained power. Electricity crackled between her fingers. "My apologies," she said, her voice carrying an edge of something dangerous. "Your equipment must be sensitive to atmospheric ionization. It happens when I get annoyed." The view screen flickered back to life. Weon's smile had vanished. "Who are you?" he asked, leaning forward. "Someone who doesn't appreciate being discussed like a laboratory specimen," Ororo replied, stepping into view. "Tell your Founders that if they want to study me, they can ask directly. I don't respond well to surveillance." Kira's hand moved subtly toward her phaser, but Sisko raised a hand slightly. "Not yet." Weon studied Ororo with renewed interest. "Remarkable. The Founders will be most intrigued to make your acquaintance, Miss Munroe. And they won't be making my acquaintance. I've dealt with enough people who think genetic superiority gives them the right to rule others." Something in Weon's expression shifted, a flicker of genuine surprise. "You misunderstand the Dominion's purpose. The Founders bring order to chaos, peace to war. They are gods in flesh, and we serve them willingly." "I've been called a goddess," Ororo said coldly. "I know what that kind of worship creates. Blind obedience. The destruction of free will. I won't be part of your empire's expansion." "The conversation is over, Weon," Sisko interjected. "Withdraw your ships from Bajoran space." Weon's pleasant mask returned. "Of course, Commander. But the Founders are patient. They have all the time in the universe." The screen went dark. Silence filled ops for 3 heartbeats. "Well," O'Brien said finally, "that was subtle." "I won't apologize," Ororo said, turning to face Sisko. "Where I come from, you stand up to tyrants immediately. You don't give them an inch." "Where you come from," Kira said, her voice tight. "Did openly antagonizing powerful enemies ever end well?" "Sometimes." Ororo met Kira's gaze steadily. "And sometimes you have to make it clear from the beginning that you won't be intimidated. The Dominion sees weakness as invitation." "She's not wrong," Odo observed from his security console. "Weon respects strength. He'll report this to the Founders, and they'll reassess their approach." Sisko rubbed his temple, feeling the beginning of a headache. Ms. Munroe, I appreciate your instincts, but in this quadrant, we have something called diplomacy. The Dominion controls most of the Gamma Quadrant, and they're actively trying to expand into the Alpha Quadrant. We're already fighting a war we might not win. Giving them a new reason to focus on Deep Space Nine isn't helpful. Then maybe you need someone willing to fight, Ororo countered. How long have you been negotiating with them? How many concessions have you made? In my experience, empires don't stop expanding because you ask nicely. She sounds like a Klingon, Kira muttered, but there was a hint of approval in her voice. Commander, Dax said from her station, I'm picking up energy fluctuations near Bajorans. Something's affecting the upper atmosphere over the Dhaka province. Ororo's eyes narrowed. What kind of fluctuations? Storm formations, Dax replied, pulling up meteorological data. Unprecedented intensity. Wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. Lightning strikes every 2.3 seconds. The Bajorans are reporting massive damage to agricultural settlements. That's not natural, Ororo said, moving to Dax's console with the confidence of someone used to reading weather patterns. The formation is too symmetrical. Too controlled. Someone is manipulating the atmosphere. The Dominion? Kira asked, already moving toward the transporter pad. Unlikely, Odo said. They just left the system. Unless this is a distraction. Ororo studied the data, her fingers tracing the storm's structure. This is artificial, but whoever's doing it doesn't have fine control. They're brute-forcing the weather patterns. It's crude. Dangerous. Can you stop it? Sisko asked. She looked up, and for a moment, vulnerability flashed across her features. I don't know. I've never manipulated an alien planet's atmosphere before. Earth's weather patterns, I know intimately. But this world has different atmospheric composition, different pressure systems, different. People are dying. Kira interrupted. The Dhaka province has 20,000 residents. Ororo's jaw tightened. She closed her eyes, and Sisko watched as her breathing deepened, slowed. When she opened them again, they had gone completely white. Prepare a runabout, she said. I'll need to be in the atmosphere to feel it properly. To understand how this world's weather thinks. Weather doesn't think, O'Brien protested. Ororo smiled, though her eyes remained at eerie white. Chief, I've spent 40 years having conversations with storms. Trust me, weather thinks. 20 minutes later, the runabout Rio Grande descended through Bajor's cloud layer with Ororo, Kira, and Dax aboard. The small vessel shuddered as it entered the storm system, rain hammering the hull with enough force to trigger structural integrity warnings. This is insane, Kira shouted over the roar of wind. We should be coordinating with Bajoran weather control, not flying into the heart of. Ororo opened the airlock. What are you doing? Dax yelled, grabbing for the emergency seal. My job, Ororo said, and stepped out into the screaming sky. Kira lunged for the airlock, but Dax caught her arm. Wait, look! Through the viewport, Ororo floated in the heart of the storm, her white hair whipping around her face like a living thing. Lightning struck her body, once, twice, a dozen times, but instead of burning her to ash, the electricity seemed to flow through her, redirecting into the clouds above. She's not falling, Kira whispered. She's flying, Dax corrected, her scientific mind already racing. The wind currents are responding to her. She's not controlling them, she's conducting them. Inside the storm, Ororo closed her eyes and listened. This was always the hardest part, the most intimate act of her power, learning to hear what a world's atmosphere was trying to say. Earth's weather had been her companion since childhood, a familiar voice she understood instinctively. But Bajor's sky spoke a different language. The air here tasted of minerals she'd never encountered. The electromagnetic field pulsed with rhythms foreign to her senses. Even the way moisture condensed, the temperature gradients, the interaction between upper and lower atmospheric pressures, all of it was subtly, fundamentally wrong compared to what her mutation had spent decades learning. But beneath the artificial storm's fury, she could feel Bajor's natural patterns. Gentler than Earth's. More stable. This was a world that had known peace in its skies, before someone forced violence upon it. Ororo reached out with her power, tentative at first, feeling for the boundaries of this manipulated weather. There she sensed it. A technological anchor point, generating subharmonic frequencies that disrupted natural wind patterns. Someone had placed weather modification equipment on the surface, crude but effective. She dove toward the ground, wind screaming past her body. The runabout followed at a safe distance as Ororo descended through layers of cloud and rain. Below, the Docker province spread out in patchwork fields and small settlements. Even from this height, she could see the devastation: collapsed buildings, flooded irrigation systems, entire orchards torn from the ground. The device sat in the center of what had once been a farming community. It was Cardassian design. She recognized the aesthetic even without technical knowledge. Angular, efficient, built with the assumption that function trumped all other concerns. Ororo landed 20 meters from the machine, her bare feet touching Bajoran soil for the first time. The ground thrummed with wrongness, with imposed order disrupting natural chaos. "Ororo to Rio Grande," she said, touching the Starfleet comm badge O'Brien had given her. "I've found the source. Cardassian weather control technology." Kira's voice crackled through the static. "The Cardassians haven't operated in this province for 3 years. Not since the withdrawal." "Then someone left a parting gift," Ororo replied, circling the device. "Or someone wants it to look like Cardassian sabotage." She reached out to touch the machine, then jerked her hand back as electricity arced from the casing. Her own lightning, the device was trying to absorb her power. "Clever," she murmured. "It feeds on atmospheric energy. The more I try to disperse the storm, the stronger it becomes." "Can you destroy it?" Dax asked. Ororo considered. A focused lightning strike could certainly obliterate the machine. But the feedback loop it had created with the storm system was delicate. Disrupting it violently might trigger a cascading atmospheric collapse, or worse, a runaway chain reaction that would turn the entire province into a permanent cyclone. She needed finesse, not force. Ororo knelt in the mud, pressing both palms flat against Bajor's earth. She'd done this countless times on Earth, connecting herself to the planet's natural electromagnetic field, becoming part of the world's weather patterns rather than commanding them from outside. But Bajorans resisted her. The planet's biosphere didn't recognize her touch. She was alien here, foreign, other. "Come on," she whispered. "I'm trying to help you." The Bajoran wind shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. And then Ororo felt it, a presence in the atmosphere that wasn't quite weather and wasn't quite but something in between. It felt curious. Ancient. Watching. Her eyes snapped open, glowing white with power and something else. "There's something in the wormhole. I can feel it observing me." "The prophets?" Kira breathed over the calm. "They're non-corporeal beings. They exist outside linear time, but they can sense events in our reality." "They're not just sensing," Ororo said, standing slowly. "They're helping?" "No. Testing. They want to see what I'll do." She turned her attention back to the weather control device, but now she understood. This wasn't random sabotage. Someone, or something, had placed this machine here deliberately, at this moment, knowing she would come through the wormhole. Knowing she would have to choose how to respond. The prophets had given her a test. Very well. She would show them what a goddess could do when she chose to be merciful instead of wrathful. Ororo raised her arms, and the sky responded. But instead of summoning more lightning, more violence, she called to the gentler aspects of Bajor's atmosphere. The warm updrafts from the southern continent. The cool, stable air masses from the northern seas. The natural humidity cycles that this world had maintained for millions of years before sentient beings evolved to witness them. She wove them together like threads in a tapestry, creating a weather pattern so perfectly balanced, so exquisitely calibrated to Bajor's natural rhythms, that the artificial storm had nowhere to anchor itself. The Cardassian device screamed as its power source, atmospheric chaos, simply dissolved. The machine sparked once, twice, then went silent. Above, the clouds began to part. Natural sunlight, Bajor's sun, not Earth's, a different color and intensity, broke through in golden shafts. The rain became a gentle mist, then stopped entirely. The wind settled into a soft breeze that smelled of wet soil and growing things. Ororo staggered, suddenly exhausted. She just manipulated an entire planet's weather system using patterns she'd learned in the span of minutes. Her mutation had adapted, but it had cost her. The runabout landed nearby, and Kira was the first out, her expression unreadable. "The Bajorans in Dakar are reporting the storm is dissipating," she said. "Damage is extensive, but the casualties are minimal. You saved thousands of lives. I did what needed to be done," Ororo replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "Ororo," Dax said, tricorder in hand, "the way you manipulated Bajor's atmosphere, the prophets were definitely involved. I'm reading temporal displacement in the weather patterns you created. Echoes of events that haven't happened yet, or already happened from their perspective. They were guiding you. Or testing me," Ororo said, "to see if I would destroy the device or heal the damage it caused. To see if I'd choose violence or restoration." A shimmer of light appeared in the air before them. Not a transporter beam, something else. More organic. More alive. A figure materialized. Bajoran, elderly, wearing the robes of a Videk. He looked at Ororo with eyes full of wonder and something close to reverence. "I am Videk Baral," he said softly. "The prophets sent me a vision 3 days ago. They showed me a woman with hair like starlight who would fall from the celestial temple and bring the winds of change to Bajorans. They called you the storm that walks." Ororo's expression hardened. "I'm not a prophet. I'm not divine. I'm a mutant with a genetic gift, nothing more. The prophets don't care what you call yourself," Baral said gently. "They care what you choose to do with your power. And today, you chose compassion." Back on Deep Space Nine, Ororo stood in the Bajoran temple, feeling profoundly uncomfortable. Videk Baral had insisted she accompany him to offer thanks to the prophets, and Kira had supported the request with an intensity that made refusal seem impossible. Now, surrounded by Bajoran monks in their simple robes, candles flickering in alcoves carved with ancient symbols, Ororo felt the old, familiar weight settling on her shoulders. She'd worn this burden before, in a small village in Kenya where drought-stricken people had called her goddess. Where they'd built altars and offered prayers and looked to her with eyes that saw divinity instead of a frightened girl who could make it rain. "You seem troubled," Baral observed, approaching with 2 cups of spring wine. "I've been worshipped before," Ororo said bluntly, refusing the drink. "It never ends well. People forget you're fallible. They stop taking responsibility for their own lives. And when you inevitably fail them, their faith turns to hatred." Baral smiled, untroubled by her rejection. "The prophets don't ask for worship. They ask for understanding. There's a difference." "Is there?" Ororo gestured to the altar, where Bajorans knelt in prayer. "Because this looks like worship to me. They don't pray to the prophets for miracles," Baral explained. "They pray for guidance in interpreting the path the prophets have revealed. The prophets exist outside linear time. Past, present, and future are the same to them. When they send visions, they're showing us possibilities, not commandments." "Then why bring me here?" Ororo demanded. "Why pull me through your wormhole from another universe entirely?" "That," Baral admitted, "is the question. But I believe the answer lies in what's coming, not what has already passed." The temple doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. Commander Sisko entered, still in uniform, his expression grim. Behind him came Odo and a woman Ororo hadn't met, human, middle-aged, wearing civilian clothes but carrying herself with military precision. "Ms. Munroe," Sisko said. "I'm sorry to interrupt, But we need to talk. This is Captain Kira Meru, Major Kira's mother. Ororo blinked in surprise. Kira had mentioned her mother died during the Cardassian occupation. But before she could process this, she noticed the woman's eyes, haunted, determined, and fixed on Ororo with unsettling focus. "You're not dead," Ororo said carefully. "No," Kira Meru replied. "I've been working undercover for Starfleet Intelligence for 3 years, gathering information on Cardassian sleeper cells in Bajoran territory. The weather control device you destroyed today? I planted it." The temperature in the temple dropped 5 degrees. Frost formed on the edges of the window frames. "You put thousands of Bajoran lives at risk," Ororo said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Why?" "Because we needed to know if you were real," another voice answered. A man in a nondescript black uniform materialized from the shadows near the altar, literally materialized, as if he'd been standing there all along and simply chose to become visible. His face was unremarkable, designed to be forgotten, but his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who dealt in secrets and lies. Section 31. Odo growled, his hand moving to his phaser. "Director Sloan." The man introduced himself with a slight nod to Ororo. "And before anyone starts making accusations, let me be clear. The weather device was programmed to shut down before causing fatal casualties. We needed to test Ms. Munroe's abilities and, more importantly, her judgment under pressure. You used Bajoran civilians as bait," Sisko said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Without authorization. Without oversight. This is exactly the kind of operation Section 31 was never supposed to conduct." "The Dominion War is killing billions, Commander," Sloan replied calmly. "We don't have the luxury of ethical hand-wringing. Ms. Munroe here demonstrated the ability to manipulate an entire planet's weather system in under an hour. Do you understand what that means? She could end droughts on Cardassia Prime, making their agricultural worlds dependent on Federation aid. She could create permanent storm systems over Dominion shipyards. She could terraform hostile worlds or destroy habitable ones. I am not a weapon," Ororo said, ice forming on her fingertips. "Everyone is a weapon in wartime," Sloan countered. "The question is whether you'll be our weapon or theirs. The Dominion already knows you exist. Weyoun's report to the Founders will reach them within hours. They'll come for you, not to study you, but to acquire you. The Vorta will offer you everything you could want. The Jem'Hadar will try to take you by force. And if either works, they'll simply kill you to prevent the Federation from using your abilities. Let them try," Ororo said, and lightning crackled across the temple ceiling. "Ororo," Beral said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. The contact seemed to ground her, literally. The electrical discharge earthed through him harmlessly into the station's superstructure. "Violence in the temple brings dishonor to the prophets." "The prophets," Sloan said with barely concealed disdain, "are non-corporeal aliens who experience time non-linearly. They're not gods, Videk. They're just another strategic factor in a very complicated war. You will leave this temple," Beral said, his gentle voice suddenly carrying absolute authority. "Now." Sloan smiled thinly. "Of course. But Ms. Munroe, consider this. Section 31 exists because sometimes the survival of civilization requires actions that civilized people find distasteful. Your powers could save billions of lives. All we ask is that you use them." "All you ask?" Ororo repeated. "Is that I become exactly what I've spent my life refusing to be. A god of war. Better a god of war than a casualty of one." Sloan nodded to Kira Meru, and both of them simply walked out, leaving a silence heavy with implications. Sisko exhaled slowly. "I didn't authorize any of this. Section 31 operates outside the normal chain of command, outside oversight, outside everything Starfleet is supposed to stand for." "Then why do they exist?" Ororo asked. "Because," Odo said bitterly, "even the Federation has shadows. And sometimes those shadows do things the light cannot acknowledge. Ororo looked at each of them in turn, Sisko with his burden of command, Bajor with his quiet faith, Odo with his cynical realism. In my universe, I worked with a team called the X-Men. We protected a world that feared us, hated us, passed laws to register us like weapons. We could have conquered. Our leader, Charles Xavier, had the psychic power to control every human mind on Earth simultaneously. Storm herself had toppled governments, ended droughts, stopped wars with a gesture. But we chose restraint. We chose to be heroes, not tyrants. This isn't your universe, Sisko said gently. The stakes here are different. Are they? Ororo challenged. Because from where I stand, every universe has the same basic choice: use power to dominate, or use power to serve. Section 31 wants me to be their weapon. The Dominion wants me to be theirs. But I'm not interested in being anyone's tool. Then what do you want? Bajor asked. Ororo looked out the temple window at Bajorans, hanging in space like a jewel. She thought of the Dakar province, its people rebuilding even now. She thought of the X-Mansion, Professor Xavier, the students she trained and protected. A universe away. Unreachable. I want to go home, she said quietly. But until I can, I want to understand why your prophets brought me here. Not to test me. Not to use me. But why, truly? Then we'll find out together, Sisko promised. 3 days passed on Deep Space Nine, and Ororo spent them learning. She studied PDD after PDD in her assigned quarters, absorbing the history of this universe with the same focused intensity she'd once applied to understanding storm systems. The Federation. The Dominion. The Borg. The complexities of warp travel and subspace physics that made her mutation seem almost quaint by comparison. But what struck her most deeply was the revelation about humanity's evolution in this timeline. You never had mutants, she said to Bashir over lunch in the replimat. The Doctor had become her unlikely guide to this universe's intricacies, partly because his own status as a genetically enhanced human gave him insight into what it meant to be different. Not in the way you describe, Bashir confirmed, setting down his Jumja stick. Genetic engineering was attempted in the late 20th century, the eugenics wars. Enhanced humans like Khan Noonien and Singh nearly conquered Earth. After that, genetic augmentation became illegal in the Federation. My own enhancements were done when I was a child, to correct developmental disabilities. Technically illegal, but my parents kept it secret. So humanity in this universe never evolved naturally beyond baseline. Ororo said. No X gene. No Homo superior. We evolved differently, Bashir suggested. Through philosophy, cooperation, technology. We eliminated poverty, war, disease. We reached the stars without needing genetic advantages. Ororo countered. You eliminated the possibility of natural selection creating something new. In my universe, mutants are the next step in human evolution. We're not better, we're just different. But humans fear difference, and that fear has driven mutants to near extinction multiple times. The Federation doesn't fear genetic differences, Bashir protested. We have member species with abilities that would seem like superpowers. Vulcan telepathy, Betist empathy. Those are species traits, Ororo interrupted. Expected. Normal for them. But I'm human with abilities humans aren't supposed to have. That's what creates fear, when your own kind becomes something other. Before Bashir could respond, Kira's voice cut through the station's comm system. All senior staff to Ops. Immediately. They ran. In Ops, the main view screen displayed a Vorta, not Wayon this time, but another clone of the Dominion's diplomatic corps. This one introduced himself as Eris, his voice smooth and persuasive. Commander Sisko, I come bearing an offer from the founders themselves. They've taken great interest in Ms. Munroe and wish to extend an invitation for cultural exchange. The Dominion has successfully integrated hundreds of species, each contributing their unique gifts to our collective prosperity. Ms. Munroe's abilities would be celebrated, not feared. Honored, not restricted. Ororo stepped into view. I've heard similar promises before. Join us, and you'll never be persecuted again. Use your power freely. It always ends the same way, my freedom exchanged for servitude. Eris smiled, unbothered. The Dominion doesn't enslave. We offer order. Structure. A place where genetic advantages are recognized as gifts from the founders themselves. You would be elevated, Ms. Munroe. Respected as the superior being you clearly are. There it is, Ororo said quietly. The poison wrapped in flattery. I'm not superior. I'm just different. Semantics, Eris replied. The founders created the Vorta and the Jem'Hadar to serve specific purposes. They recognize that some beings are meant to lead, others to follow. You, with your extraordinary abilities, are clearly meant for greatness. The Federation's egalitarian philosophy holds you back. The Federation treats me as a person. Ororo countered. Your founders would treat me as a tool. And Section 31? Eris asked, his smile sharpening. Do they treat you as a person? Or did they test you like a weapon, measuring your destructive capacity against strategic objectives? Silence in ops. Eris had done his homework. The Dominion knows everything that happens in this quadrant. Eris continued. We know Section 31 staged the Bajoran weather crisis. We know Starfleet intelligence debates how to utilize your abilities. We even know that some Federation scientists want to study your genetic structure, hoping to replicate your mutation. At least the founders are honest about their intentions. Honest tyranny is still tyranny, Sisko said firmly. Is it tyranny when it brings peace? Eris asked. The Alpha Quadrant burns with conflict. Federation against Klingon, Romulan against Cardassian, countless worlds caught in the crossfire. The Dominion offers an end to chaos. Order. Stability. Mess. Munroe, you could help us bring that peace. Your abilities could end droughts, stop environmental disasters, make hostile worlds habitable. You could save billions of lives. Ororo felt the weight of those words. How many times had she used her powers for exactly those purposes? Ended droughts in Africa. Diverted hurricanes from populated coastlines. Saved countless lives through the simple application of her mutation. But she also remembered what happened when power was concentrated, when beings with abilities decided they knew what was best for everyone else. I've met your Jem'Hadar, she said. Genetically engineered soldiers addicted to a drug you control. They have no choice but to serve. That's not peace, that's slavery. The Jem'Hadar are honored warriors, Eris protested. They live for battle, for glory in the service of the founders. Because you made them that way, Ororo shot back. You engineered their very desires to match your needs. In my universe, there was a man named William Stryker who tried to do the same to mutants, control us through our genetics, make us loyal soldiers incapable of disobedience. We fought a war to stop him. Eris's expression cooled. Then you condemn billions to suffer when you could help them. How noble. I condemn no one, Ororo said. But I won't help an empire that treats sentient beings as property, no matter how pretty the justification. The founders will be disappointed, Eris said. They had hoped you would see reason. But they are patient. When the Federation inevitably fails you, when their fear of your power manifests as restrictions and regulations, when they tried to control you for the greater good, the Dominion will still welcome you. The screen went dark. He's not wrong about one thing, Odo said quietly. The Federation will struggle with you. Your power exceeds any individuals in their history. There will be questions. Committees. Regulations. Let them question, Ororo said. I've spent my life justifying my existence to people who fear me. At least here, I can choose who I stand with. And who do you stand with? Kira asked, her tone neutral but her eyes intense. Ororo looked around Ops. At Sisko carrying the burden of command and prophecy, at Kira fighting for a world still healing from occupation, at Odo seeking justice despite being surrounded by prejudice against his own kind, at Dax with her joined symbiont and centuries of experience, at O'Brien keeping everything functional through sheer determination, at Bashir hiding his enhancements while using them to save lives. I stand with people who choose to do right despite the cost, Ororo said. Not because gods or genetics or empire command it, but because they choose it. That's the Federation I can respect. Even knowing we'll disappoint you eventually? Sisko asked. Everyone disappoints eventually, Ororo replied. The question is whether you keep trying anyway. The alarm woke Ororo at 0300 station time. She was on her feet instantly, white hair crackling with static electricity, before her conscious mind fully registered the red alert klaxons. All hands to battle stations, O'Brien's voice announced over the comm. Cardassian warships approaching the station. They're hailing us, but their weapons are hot. Ororo grabbed the Starfleet comm badge and uniform jacket they provided her. She still refused the full uniform, but the jacket's environmental controls were useful, and ran for ops. The view screen showed 3 Cardassian Gala-class warships in attack formation. On screen stood Gul Dukat, his reptilian features arranged in an expression of calculated charm that reminded Ororo uncomfortably of politicians she'd dealt with back home. Commander Sisko, Dukat said warmly, as if they were old friends meeting for drinks. I apologize for the early hour, but I've come on a matter of some urgency. It has come to the Cardassian Union's attention that you're harboring a genetic augment of extraordinary power. We'd like to discuss custody arrangements. Ms. Munroe is a guest of the Federation, Sisko replied, his voice level but hard. Not a prisoner to be transferred. Guest? Dukat's eyebrow ridge rose. How fascinating that the Federation suddenly approves of genetic enhancement. I was under the impression such things were illegal in your territory. Khan Nunyan Singh, wasn't it? The great monster your people still fear? Ororo stepped into view. I'm not genetically engineered. I'm naturally evolved. There's a difference. Dukat's eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. Ah, the Weather Witch herself. You know, Ms. Munroe, Cardassia Prime has suffered from severe drought conditions for the past decade. Our agricultural output has diminished 40%. Millions of our people face food shortages. Someone with your abilities could end that suffering with a thought. So could Federation aid packages, Kira snapped. But you've rejected every offer because accepting help damages Cardassian pride. Pride feeds no one, Major, Dukat replied smoothly. But Ms. Munroe could feed millions. All we ask is her cooperation in restoring Cardassia to its former glory. Its former glory as an occupying power? Ororo asked. I've read about Bajor's occupation. About the labor camps, the executions, the systematic destruction of Bajoran culture. You want me to help rebuild the empire that committed those atrocities? Dukat's expression hardened. The occupation was a civilizing mission. We brought order to chaos, infrastructure to a backward world. The Bajorans were fortunate to receive Cardassian guidance. Fortunate, Kira repeated, her voice shaking with rage. My people were enslaved. Millions died. Children worked in ore processing facilities until their bodies gave out. And you call that fortune? History is written by the victors, Major, Dukat said. And Cardassia is far from defeated. Ms. Munroe, I offer you a simple choice. Come with us willingly and help save Cardassian lives, or we'll be forced to take you. My ships have been equipped with technology specifically designed to disrupt atmospheric manipulation. You may command the weather, but we command the weapons. Ororo felt the old anger rising, the fury she'd learned to control through years of meditation and discipline. Men like Dukat existed in every universe, convinced of their own superiority, viewing others as tools to be used or obstacles to be removed. Your ships, she said quietly, generate their power through plasma reaction assemblies. Those assemblies create heat. Heat creates atmospheric disturbances, even in space. Dukat frowned. What are you? Ororo's eyes went white. Outside the station, the vacuum of space suddenly filled with impossible lightning. It arced from Deep Space Nine's shields to the Cardassian vessels, following the thermal signatures of their weapons systems. "That's impossible," O'Brien breathed. "There's no atmosphere in space for lightning to." "There's always atmosphere," Ororo said, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "Gas particles, plasma emissions, solar wind. Enough for someone who knows how to listen." The Cardassian ship's shields flared, struggling to compensate for an attack that shouldn't exist. Their weapons powered down, not destroyed, but disrupted enough to make targeting impossible. "This is your only warning, Gul Dukat," Ororo said. "Leave. Tell your government that I won't be conscripted, purchased, or threatened. And tell them that if Cardassia wants help with its drought, it can ask nicely instead of demanding." Dukat's expression cycled through surprise, anger, and finally, grudging respect. "You are formidable, Ms. Munroe. But this isn't over. Cardassia has a long memory and longer reach. We'll meet again." The viewscreen went dark as the Cardassian ships withdrew to a safe distance, maintaining position outside weapons range, but clearly not departing the system. "They're not leaving," Odo observed. "No," Sisko agreed. "They're waiting. Watching. Dukat doesn't give up easily." Ororo's eyes returned to normal, and she swayed slightly. Kira caught her arm. "Are you all right? Manipulating space weather is harder than planetary atmospheres," Ororo admitted. "The energy dispersal patterns are completely different. I was essentially creating localized atmosphere bubbles using the gas emissions from their ships." "That's incredible," Dax said, reviewing her sensor logs. "You generated coherent lightning strikes in near-vacuum conditions." "The physics shouldn't allow for that level of ionization without a sustaining medium." "My mutation doesn't care about what physics allows," Ororo said tiredly. "It cares about what's possible. There's a difference. Ms. Munroe," Sisko said carefully, "you just demonstrated you can disable enemy vessels without destroying them. That's a tactical advantage the Federation hasn't had since before the Dominion War began." "Don't," Ororo warned, pulling away from Kira's support. "Don't start calculating my strategic value. That's exactly what Section 31 did. What the Dominion did. What the Cardassians just tried. I'm not trying to use you," Sisko protested. "But I'd be a fool not to recognize what you represent. The Dominion has the Jem'Hadar. The Cardassians have their military discipline and ruthlessness. The Federation needs every advantage we can get. Even if that advantage is a person who explicitly told you she doesn't want to be a weapon?" Sisko's jaw tightened. "Even then. Because if we lose this war, everything the Federation stands for, peace, exploration, cooperation, dies with it. Sometimes the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." "Spock's philosophy," Ororo said bitterly. "I've read about him. Logical, reasonable, and completely willing to sacrifice individual rights for collective survival. It kept the Federation alive," Kira said quietly. "Sacrifices have kept Bajorans alive. Sometimes there's no good choice, only less terrible ones." Ororo looked at the Bajoran major. A woman who'd fought in the Resistance, killed Cardassian soldiers, made impossible decisions in impossible circumstances. There was no judgment in Kira's eyes, only hard-earned understanding. "In my universe," Ororo said slowly, "we had a leader who believed in peaceful coexistence. Charles Xavier taught us that mutants and humans could live together, that we should use our powers to protect even those who hated us. But we also had another leader, Magneto. He believed mutants were superior, that we should rule over baseline humans for their own good. I've spent my life trying to follow Xavier's path. But?" Sisko prompted. "But Xavier's school was destroyed 6 times. His students murdered. His dream burned again and again by people who feared what we represented. And every time, Magneto would ask, 'When will you stop being their protector and start being their equal?' What did you answer? Dax asked. I never had a good answer. Ororo admitted. I just kept fighting. Kept believing. Kept hoping that eventually, humans would see us as people instead of threats. Did they? Kira asked. Ororo's silence was answer enough. The prophets called to her that night. Ororo didn't understand how she knew. There was no voice, no vision, no external summons. But she woke with absolute certainty that the wormhole wanted her presence. Needed it. She dressed in darkness and made her way through Deep Space Nine's corridors. The station operated on reduced crew during night cycles, and the few people she passed barely glanced at the white-haired woman moving with purpose toward the upper pylons. The temple was empty except for Vedek Beryl, who stood before the altar as if he'd been waiting for her. You heard them too, he said. Not a question. I don't hear anything, Ororo replied. I just know. Like knowing a storm is coming before the first cloud appears. Beryl smiled. The prophets exist outside linear time. They don't speak in words, they speak in certainties. In truths that simply are. He gestured to the observation window. They want you to enter the wormhole. Through the viewport, the celestial temple shimmered into existence, its blue-white vortex swirling with impossible geometries. Ororo felt pulled toward it, not physically but spiritually, as if some part of her mutation recognized kinship with the forces inside. The last time someone pulled me through a cosmic anomaly, Ororo said, I ended up in a universe that wants to weaponize me. Perhaps, Beryl suggested gently. The prophets want to show you why. Ororo contacted Ops. Sisko answered immediately. He apparently slept as little as she did. I need a runabout, she said. I'm going into the wormhole. Absolutely not, Sisko replied. We don't know how the wormhole's exotic particles might interact with your mutation. You could destabilize the entire phenomenon. Or, Ororo countered, the prophets pulled me across universes for a reason, and that reason is inside their temple. Commander, I'm going. You can either provide transportation or watch me fly there under my own power. A long pause. Then, Dax will pilot you. If anything seems unstable, she's pulling you out immediately. 20 minutes later, the runabout Ganges approached the wormholes of End Horizon. Dax sat at the helm, her centuries of joined memories giving her perspective Ororo couldn't begin to match. I've been through the wormhole hundreds of times, Dax said. Curzon, my previous host, was one of the first Federation officers to make contact with the prophets. But they're not consistent. Sometimes they ignore you completely. Sometimes they pull you into their nonlinear reality, and show you things that haven't happened yet, or already happened, or might happen if different choices are made. Comforting, Ororo said dryly. They entered the wormhole. Reality fractured. Ororo found herself standing on the bridge of a starship she didn't recognize. Around her, the crew fought desperately against Jem'Hadar borders. She watched herself. A version of herself wearing a Starfleet uniform with captain's pips, summon a hurricane inside the ship's corridors, wind strong enough to tear the Jem'Hadar apart at the molecular level. The vision shifted. She stood on Cardassia Prime, hands raised to the sky. Rain fell in sheets, ending decades of drought. But the Cardassians weren't grateful, they were terrified. Gul Dukat ordered her arrested, weaponized, studied. She saw herself in a laboratory, unconscious, while Cardassian scientists extracted genetic samples. Another shift. The Dominion War had ended. The Federation had won, but at terrible cost. She stood beside Sisko in a ruined Federation Council chamber on Earth. He was older, scarred, broken. We won because of you, he said. Because you killed 3 billion Jem'Hadar by triggering a planetary electromagnetic pulse on their breeding facilities. We won because you became exactly what we needed you to be. No, Ororo whispered. These are possibilities, a voice said, not spoken but understood. Linear existence is choice between paths. You are storm. Storm destroys or storm nourishes. Which are you? The prophet manifested as a figure from Ororo's past, Charles Xavier, though she knew it wasn't really him. The entity simply wore a familiar face to make communication easier. I am both, Ororo said. That's what Xavier taught me. Power without restraint is tyranny. But restraint without power is helplessness. Federation seeks balance. Dominion seeks order. Cardassians seek strength. You seek home. The prophet Xavier tilted his head. But home is gone. This universe is possibility. What will you choose? Why did you bring me here? Ororo demanded. If you exist outside time, you know what I'll choose. Why test me? We do not test. We illuminate. Linear beings cannot see all paths. We show paths so choice is informed. More visions cascaded through Ororo's consciousness. She saw herself training Starfleet officers in atmospheric combat techniques. Saw herself leading a mutant uprising among the genetically modified underclass of the Federation's forgotten colonies. Saw herself returning to her own universe, leaving this reality to burn in the Dominion War. Saw herself sacrificing everything to become the Federation's ultimate weapon, the war-ending power that saved trillions of lives at the cost of her own soul. Stop! Ororo shouted, and thunder echoed through the nonlinear space of the wormhole. Stop showing me futures I don't want. All futures exist until choice collapses possibility to singular path. The prophet explained patiently. You are unusual. Your essence touches atmosphere, mutable, changeable, responsive to smallest variation. In your universe, atmosphere follows natural law. In this universe, atmosphere follows your will. You are more powerful here. Ororo felt the truth of it. Her mutation had always worked by manipulating existing weather patterns, amplifying natural tendencies. But in this universe, with its exotic particles and subspace phenomena and quantum uncertainties, her power could do more. Create weather from nothing. Manipulate atmospheric conditions that shouldn't exist. Become, truly, the goddess people had once called her. I don't want godhood, Ororo said firmly. Irrelevant. Power exists whether wanted or not. Question is use. Question is always use. The prophet Xavier stepped closer, and Ororo saw compassion in those borrowed features. War comes. Dominion expands. Cardassians rebuild. Federation weakens. In 17 standard rotations, Dominion fleet arrives at Bajorans with weapon designed to ignite planetary atmosphere. Turn entire world into inferno. Kill all life instantly. Ororo's blood ran cold. 17 days? Yes. They build weapon now. Test on uninhabited worlds. Success rate 94%. Bajoran population 4,200,007,312. All will die unless variable changes. And I'm the variable. You are possibility. You can prevent weapon deployment. You can disrupt Dominion atmospheric research. You can protect Bajorans. Or you can choose different path. All paths are valid. All paths have cost. The visions intensified, showing her the burning of Bajorans in horrifying detail. She saw Kira die defending her world. Saw Sisko consumed by flames, his role as emissary ending in ash. Saw the Bajoran temples reduced to molten glass. Why show me this? Ororo demanded, tears streaming down her face. Why make me responsible for saving a world I barely know? You are not responsible. You are capable. Difference is significant. Responsibility is choice. Capability is merely fact. The prophet released her, and Ororo stumbled backward into the runabout, gasping, her uniform soaked with sweat. Dax gripped her shoulders, eyes wide with concern. You've been unconscious for 3 minutes, Dax said urgently. What happened? What did they show you? Ororo looked out at the wormhole collapsing behind them, at Bajorans hanging peaceful and beautiful in the distance, unaware of the annihilation racing toward it. They showed me the future, Ororo whispered. And they gave me a choice. The emergency briefing in Sisko's office included only the senior staff and Videk Baral. Ororo stood by the window, watching Bajorans rotate slowly beneath the station while she explained what the prophets had revealed. 17 days, Sisko repeated, his voice hollow. Are you certain? The prophets don't lie, Baral said quietly. They may communicate in ways we find confusing, but deception isn't within their nature. An atmospheric ignition weapon, O'Brien muttered, calling up technical schematics on his PDD. It's theoretically possible. You'd need to introduce a catalytic agent into the upper atmosphere, something that triggers a chain reaction with oxygen molecules. The entire planetary envelope would become fuel. Can we evacuate 4 billion people in 17 days? Kira asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. The entire Federation fleet couldn't evacuate that many in 17 weeks, Dax replied grimly. Even with every transport ship we could requisition, we'd save maybe 2% of the population. Then we stop the weapon, Sisko said flatly. We find the Dominion research facility and destroy it before they can deploy. According to the Prophet's vision, Ororo said, the facility is in the Gamma Quadrant, deep in Dominion space. 3 weeks travel through the wormhole, even at maximum warp. We don't have time to mount a conventional assault. Then an unconventional assault, Odo suggested. A small team. Sabata. I could infiltrate as a founder. They'd skin you the moment you approached. Kira interrupted. The founders know every changeling in the Alpha Quadrant switched sides. They're paranoid about infiltration now. Silence settled over the room like a shroud. There's another option, Ororo said slowly. The weapon depends on atmospheric conditions being perfect. Oxygen content, pressure levels, humidity ratios, all have to align precisely for the chain reaction to work. The prophets showed me the tests they've conducted. Every failure happened because local atmospheric conditions were slightly off specification. So we changed Bajor's atmosphere, Bashir said, understanding dawning. Make it incompatible with their weapon. Exactly. I can alter the atmospheric composition enough to prevent ignition while keeping it breathable for Bajorans. The Dominion would need months to recalibrate their weapon for the new conditions. But you'd have to maintain those alterations indefinitely, Dax objected. The moment you stop, natural processes would return the atmosphere to its original state. Then I don't stop, Ororo said. I stay. I'd become Bajor's atmospheric guardian. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. No, Kira said sharply. Absolutely not. You'd be imprisoned here, constantly maintaining our world's weather. That's not salvation, that's slavery. It's survival, Ororo countered. 4 billion lives, Major. Isn't that worth one person's freedom? Not like this, Kira insisted, standing to face Ororo directly. I fought the Cardassians for freedom. My people endured decades of occupation. I won't accept protection that comes at the cost of someone else's imprisonment. Even if the alternative is extinction? Even then, Kira's voice cracked. Because if we survive only by enslaving you, we've lost everything Bajoran stands for. We'd become exactly what we fought against. Major Kira is right, Baral said softly. The prophets teach us that freedom is the first gift of existence. To preserve Bajoran lives by stealing yours would corrupt the very souls we're trying to save. Ororo felt something break inside her chest, gratitude, perhaps, or recognition. In her own universe, how many times had governments, organizations, even well-meaning heroes asked mutants to sacrifice their autonomy for the greater good? How many times had she heard, "Your powers could save millions if you just let us coordinate your efforts." Then what do we do? She asked. I won't stand by and watch 4 billion people burn. We find the facility, Sisko said decisively. And we destroy it. But we do it together, as a crew, not by sacrificing one person. Benjamin, Dax said gently. The math doesn't work. We can't reach the facility and return in 17 days. Then we don't return, Sisko replied. We take the Defiant, go through the wormhole, and we don't come back until that weapon is destroyed. Even if it takes months. Even if we're trapped in the Gamma Quadrant. Bajorans gets those extra months to evacuate, to prepare defenses, to find another solution. A suicide mission, Odo observed without emotion. A necessary mission, Sisko corrected. I'm not ordering anyone to come. But I'm going. I'm in, Kira said immediately. As am I, Odo added. One by one, the senior staff volunteered. Even Bashir, who admitted he was terrified, insisted his medical skills might be needed. Ororo watched them commit to almost certain death with a calmness that spoke of deeper conviction. These weren't superheroes with extraordinary powers. They were ordinary people choosing to do an extraordinary thing because it was right. There's a faster way, Ororo said quietly. The prophets exist outside linear time. They pulled me from another universe. If they wanted to, they could transport the Defiant instantly to the Dominion facility. Beryl shook his head. The prophets don't intervene directly in linear affairs. They illuminate paths but don't walk them for us. They made an exception for me. Ororo pointed out. Maybe they'll make another. Or, Dax said, her eyes brightening, maybe they already have. Ororo, the prophets showed you the weapon facility, right? You saw it in your vision? Yes. A space station orbiting a gas giant. The atmosphere was toxic, methane and ammonia compounds. Could you replicate those atmospheric conditions? Dax asked urgently. Ororo considered. Theoretically, yes. Why? Because if you can create a localized atmospheric pocket that matches the research facility's environment, you might be able to disrupt their experiments from here. Gas giants have incredibly complex atmospheric dynamics. If you could generate interference patterns, introduce chaotic variables into their test conditions, they'd never get reliable data. O'Brien finished excitedly. Every test would show different results. They'd have to start from scratch, recalibrate everything. That could buy us months, maybe years. But I've never manipulated an atmosphere I wasn't physically present in, Ororo protested. The distance alone. The wormhole. Beryl interrupted, sudden understanding illuminating his features. It's a stable corridor between 2 points in space. If you entered the wormhole and extended your power through it, you could reach the Gamma Quadrant without traveling there. That's insane, Bashir said. The energy requirements alone. I've manipulated Earth's entire magnetosphere, Ororo said slowly, her mind racing through possibilities. Created hurricanes spanning multiple continents. The scale isn't the problem. But holding a connection through the wormhole while simultaneously generating weather patterns in an alien atmosphere I've never touched. That's complicated. Can you do it? Sisko asked simply. Ororo looked at each of them, these people who'd refused to let her sacrifice herself, who'd been willing to die rather than enslave her, who'd shown her that perhaps this universe wasn't so different from her own after all. Just people trying to do right in impossible circumstances. I can try, she said. But if this works, it'll take everything I have. I'll need to enter the wormhole, connect with the prophet's non-linear perception of reality, and use that connection to bridge the distance. I'll essentially be asking my mutation to function across thousands of light-years simultaneously. The prophets will help, Beryl said with absolute certainty. This is why they brought you here. Not to be a weapon. Not to be imprisoned. But to do what only you can do. Bridge the impossible gap between universes and save a world. The Defiant accompanied Ororo's runabout to the wormhole's threshold. Sisko had insisted on a military escort, though what the Defiant's weapons could do against non-corporeal beings was questionable at best. Ororo sat in the runabout's pilot seat, though she wasn't actually piloting. Dax had remotely linked the controls to the Defiant's helm. She needed to focus entirely on what came next. Ororo. Sisko's voice came through the comm. You don't have to do this. We can still find another way. In 17 days? Ororo replied. Commander, we both know there is no other way. But I appreciate the sentiment. Through the viewport, the wormhole began to open, responding to the runabout's approach. The familiar blue-white vortex swirled into existence, but this time Ororo saw it differently. Not as a tunnel through space, but as a living thing. A membrane between realities, thin as thought and old as existence itself. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mutation, feeling for the atmospheric patterns inside the wormhole. There, the exotic particles, the quantum fluctuations, the impossible weather of subspace itself. It responded to her touch like a familiar storm, welcoming her awareness. Entering the wormhole now, Dax reported. The runabout crossed the event horizon, and reality fractured again. But this time, Ororo was ready. She didn't fight the nonlinear perception. She embraced it, let her consciousness expand beyond the limitations of sequential time. The prophets manifested around her, dozens of them, wearing faces from her past. Charles Xavier. Jean Grey. Her mother, dead these many years. Even Magneto stood among them, his borrowed face showing an expression the real Magneto had never worn, approval. Storm who walks between worlds. They spoke in unison. You have chosen freely. Not weapon. Not slave. Not goddess. But guardian who chooses to guard. I need your help, Ororo said. I need to reach the Gamma Quadrant, to touch an atmosphere I've never felt, to manipulate weather across a distance that should be impossible. All distance is illusion, the prophets replied. All separation is perspective. We exist here and there simultaneously. We can teach you to do same. For brief moment. For necessary moment. What's the cost? Ororo asked, because power always had a cost. Linear existence will be painful afterward. You will experience time as we do, past, present, future overlapping. Confusion will last days, maybe weeks. Mind not meant for nonlinear perception struggles to return to linearity. Ororo thought of 4 billion Bajorans. Of Kira's fierce dedication to freedom. Of Sisko carrying the weight of prophecy. Of a world she'd known for less than a week but had somehow come to care about. Show me, she said. The prophets reached into her consciousness, and suddenly Ororo perceived reality the way they did. She existed in all moments simultaneously, standing in the wormhole, fighting Jem'Hadar in futures that might never happen, dying of old age on Bajorans in timelines that could still collapse, being born on Earth in a universe she could never return to. And there, among the infinite possibilities, she felt it, the Dominion Research Facility. The toxic gas giant. The artificial station where scientists worked to perfect their atmospheric weapon. She reached across the impossible distance, her mutation stretching like lightning across the gap between now and then, here and there. Her consciousness touched the alien atmosphere, methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide compounds that would kill any human instantly but were just weather to her enhanced senses. The Dominion scientists didn't notice at first. How could they? Their instruments weren't designed to detect a consciousness manipulating atmospheric pressure from thousands of light years away. Ororo began with subtlety. A shift in wind patterns. A slight increase in upper atmospheric turbulence. Small changes that would seem like natural variation to anyone who didn't know better. But then she felt the weapon, felt its catalytic agents being introduced into a test atmosphere, felt the chain reaction beginning, felt the temperature spike that would soon ignite the entire envelope. No, she whispered, and her power answered with violence. Hurricane-force winds tore through the research station's test chamber. Lightning. Impossible lightning in an atmosphere that shouldn't support it, struck the weapon's delivery system. The catalytic agent dispersed harmlessly, diluted by torrential rains that Ororo summoned from the methane clouds below. Alarms blared across the facility. The scientists scrambled to understand what had happened. Their instruments showed impossible readings, atmospheric conditions fluctuating wildly, weather patterns that defied every model they'd constructed. Again. A Vorta supervisor commanded. Deploy the weapon again. They tried. Ororo destroyed it again. And again. And again. Each time they attempted to create controlled conditions for ignition, she introduced chaos. Shifted pressure systems. Altered wind vectors. Changed the atmospheric composition by parts per million, enough to invalidate their data without being obvious enough to suggest intelligent interference. Hours passed. Or perhaps seconds. In the nonlinear space of the wormhole, time had no meaning. Ororo existed simultaneously in every moment of the battle, fighting the weapon in past, present, and future at once. But the strain was immense. Her consciousness stretched across the galaxy, maintaining weather patterns on an alien world while her body remained in the wormhole, while her mind tried to hold on to linear identity despite experiencing all time simultaneously. Enough, the prophet said gently. Weapon is failed. Research corrupted beyond salvage. They will abandon this approach. Bajorans is safe. How long? Ororo gasped, feeling her mind beginning to splinter under the strain. How long until they find another weapon? Years. Perhaps decades. Time enough for other choices, other paths. Your task is complete. The prophets withdrew their support, and Ororo's consciousness snapped back into linear existence like a rubber band released. The shock of sequential time, of experiencing one moment after another instead of all moments simultaneously, hit her like physical pain. She screamed. In the Defiant, Sisko watched his sensors in horror as the runabout began to tumble, emerging from the wormhole at dangerous velocity. Tractor beam! Now! The Defiant's beam caught the runabout just before it would have collided with the station. They pulled Ororo's vessel into the docking bay, where Bashir and a medical team waited. They found her unconscious, her hair completely white where before there had been hints of black at the roots. Her vital signs were stable, but her neural patterns showed activity unlike anything Bashir had ever recorded, as if her brain was firing in sequences that shouldn't be possible, perceiving time in ways human neurology wasn't designed to handle. Will she recover? Kira asked, gripping the side of the bed. I don't know, Bashir admitted. Her condition is beyond anything in my medical database. It's like her consciousness is still partially existing outside linear time. Beryl entered the infirmary, his expression serene despite the crisis. She walked with the prophets. That changes a person. She'll find her way back, but she'll never be quite the same. Is Bajoran safe? Sisko demanded. Our long-range sensors confirm massive disruption at the Dominion Research Facility, Dax reported, entering behind Beryl. They're evacuating the station. Whatever Ororo did, it worked. The weapon program has been scrapped. 4 billion lives saved. One woman broken by the effort. Ororo's eyes opened suddenly, glowing that otherworldly white. When she spoke, her voice echoed with temporal displacement, words existing in multiple moments simultaneously. Past is present is future is past. Storm remembers what hasn't happened yet. Storm sees what already was. Storm is. Her eyes rolled back, and consciousness fled again. 5 days passed before Ororo truly returned to herself. The recovery wasn't linear, appropriate, given what she'd experienced. Some moments she existed fully in the present, lucid and aware. Other times she'd speak of events that hadn't occurred yet, or weep for losses that had already been prevented, or laugh at jokes no one had told yet. Bashir monitored her constantly, documenting a condition he termed temporal perception syndrome. Her neural pathways had been fundamentally altered by exposure to nonlinear existence. She would always perceive time slightly differently now, always sense the possibilities branching from each moment. On the 5th day, she walked into the temple alone. Beryl found her there an hour later, sitting before the altar with her hands pressed against the cold stone floor. Her eyes were closed, but tears ran down her cheeks. I can feel them, she said without opening her eyes. The prophets. They're always there now, existing in the space between seconds. I'll never be free of their presence. Beryl sat beside her. Is that such a terrible thing? To know you're not alone, even in the silence? I came from a universe where I could fly above the highest mountains and be truly alone with the wind. Ororo replied. Now I'll always feel them watching, witnessing, existing alongside every moment I experience. The price of salvation, Beryl observed gently. The price of choice, Ororo corrected. I chose to save Bajorans. I chose to walk with non-corporeal beings. I chose to stretch my mutation beyond its natural limits. She finally opened her eyes. They were blue again, but deeper now, holding depths that hadn't been there before. I don't regret it. But I miss who I was before. We all do, Beryl said. Every choice changes us. Every sacrifice leaves scars. But you're still Ororo Munroe. Still the woman who refused to be weapon, slave, or goddess. That core remains. Footsteps echoed in the temple. Sisko entered, carrying a PADD and wearing an expression that somehow combined relief and concern. You're awake, he said. Bashir said you might need a few more days. I'm functional enough, Ororo replied, standing with only slight unsteadiness. What's happened? How long was I away? 5 days. The Dominion filed a formal protest with the Federation, claiming we deployed a weapon of mass destruction against their research facility. They're demanding reparations and threatening to escalate military action. Ororo smiled bitterly. Of course they are. The Federation Council wants to meet with you. Sisko continued. They're calling it a debriefing, but we both know it's an evaluation. They want to assess whether you're a threat or an asset. Back to that again, Ororo said quietly. Weapon or tool. Never just a person. I told them you'd testify voluntarily, Sisko said. But only on your terms. You're not a prisoner or a soldier. You're a guest who saved 4 billion lives. That buys you leverage. Leverage, Ororo repeated, tasting the word. In my universe, mutants never had leverage. We had powers, and humans had laws to contain us. Registration acts. Mutant detention facilities. Genetic screening programs. Our existence was always framed as a problem to be solved. This isn't your universe, Kira said, entering the temple with Odo beside her. Here you have allies. People who won't let the Federation reduce you to a classification. The Major is correct, Odo added. I've spent my life being viewed as a security threat simply because of my species. I won't stand by while they do the same to you. Ororo felt warmth spread through her chest. Gratitude, recognition, the profound relief of not being alone. Thank you, all of you. But the Federation Council isn't wrong to be concerned. I just demonstrated I can manipulate weather across interstellar distances. That I can work with non-corporeal beings to extend my powers beyond any reasonable limit. I am dangerous. So is a photon torpedo, O'Brien said, appearing in the temple doorway with Dax. Doesn't mean we ban them. We just treat them with respect. And establish protocols, Dax added. The Federation has managed relationships with immensely powerful beings before. Cue the Metrans, the Organians. We can figure this out. If you want to, Sisko said, meeting Ororo's eyes directly. The choice is yours. You can go to Earth, meet the Council, try to build a place in this universe. Or? Ororo prompted. Or the Prophets could send you home, Beryl finished quietly. They brought you here. With their power and your connection to them now, returning you to your own universe might be possible. Ororo's breath caught. Home. The X-Mansion. Her students. Professor Xavier. Storm returning to the woman she'd been, the life she'd known, the universe where she belonged. But she'd never truly be that woman again, would she? She'd been changed fundamentally by this experience. She'd walked with beings outside time, stretched her mutation to impossible limits, made choices that saved billions in a universe that wasn't even hers. And she'd found something here she'd rarely experienced in her own universe: acceptance without reservation. These people had refused to use her, to enslave her, to treat her as anything but a person making free choices. "I need to know," Ororo said slowly. "What happens to Bajorans if I leave? Will the Dominion find another weapon? Another way to destroy this world?" "Unknown," Odo replied. "The Dominion is persistent. They'll find other strategies, other weapons. But we'll face them as we always have, together." "And you?" Ororo asked, turning to Sisko. "What do you want me to do, Commander? Stay and become Starfleet's atmospheric warfare specialist? Or leave and let you fight your war without complication?" Sisko was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of prophecy, of a man who also walked between worlds. "I want you to choose freely. Not because the prophets orchestrated your arrival. Not because the Federation needs your power. Not because Bajorans owes you a debt. But because you, Ororo Munroe, decided this is where you want to be." "Free choice," Ororo echoed. "Not destiny. Not obligation. Just choice." She walked to the temple window and looked out at Bajorans, that beautiful world spinning peacefully below. 4 billion people who would never know how close they'd come to annihilation. Who would live, love, struggle, and die without ever understanding that a woman from another universe had sacrificed her sanity, and perhaps her soul, to save them. In her own universe, mutants saved humanity repeatedly. They prevented genocides, stopped world-ending threats, protected people who built sentinel robots to hunt them down. And humanity had never stopped fearing them, hating them, trying to eliminate them. But here, people knew what she'd done. Knew the cost. And they still offered her choice instead of chains. "I'll stay," Ororo said finally. "Not as a weapon. Not as Starfleet's secret defense. But as, what? An independent agent? A consultant? Someone who'll use her abilities when she chooses, for causes she believes in? An ally," Kira said firmly. "Someone who fights alongside us, not for us. The Federation Council won't like that arrangement," Dax observed. "Then the Federation Council can learn to adapt," Sisko replied. "Ms. Munroe earned the right to set her own terms." Ororo turned from the window, and for the first time since awakening, she smiled, genuinely, without reservation or pain. "Then I suppose I should prepare testimony that makes that clear. Diplomatically, of course." "Of course," Sisko agreed, his own smile matching hers. "Though I suspect your definition of diplomatic might test the Council's patience." "Good," Ororo said. "Let them see what it means to treat someone with respect instead of fear. Let them learn that power controlled by free choice is far safer than power controlled by law." She looked at each of them in turn, this crew that had become, and possibly, her family in just days. Not by blood or shared history, but by shared values. By the simple recognition that freedom mattered more than security, that dignity trumped utility, that people were always more than their abilities. "I left one world behind," Ororo said quietly. "Perhaps the prophets brought me here not to save Bajorans, but to discover I could belong somewhere. Even in a universe that isn't mine." "Then welcome home," Kira said, and meant it. Outside the temple, the Bajoran sun set in colors Ororo's Earth had never produced. Purples and golds and shades of blue that spoke of alien atmospheres and new possibilities. She felt the wind shift, responsive to her presence, welcoming her influence. The storm had found a place to rest. Not forever, storms were never meant to be still. But for now, for this moment existing between past and future, Ororo Munroe was exactly where she chose to be. And that choice made all the difference. 3 months passed. Ororo stood before the Federation Council on Earth, not as a supplicant seeking permission, but as an equal negotiating terms. She wore clothing of her own design, a fusion of her X-Men uniform's aesthetic and Bajoran traditional garments, white and blue fabric that moved like clouds around her form. A statement: she belonged to either world completely, but carried both within her. The Council had expected her to beg for asylum, to accept restrictions on her abilities, to submit to Federation oversight. Instead, she'd presented them with an ultimatum wrapped in diplomatic courtesy. She would offer her assistance when requested, but would never be conscripted, studied without consent, or treated as Federation property. Some Council members had objected. Others had threatened. But in the end, they'd accepted her terms, because the alternative was losing her entirely, and the Dominion War still raged. Now, back on Deep Space Nine, Ororo trained Starfleet officers in atmospheric combat theory, worked with Bajoran agricultural specialists to optimize weather patterns for crop growth, and occasionally disappeared into the wormhole to commune with the prophets. Her temporal perception syndrome never fully healed, but she'd learned to navigate it, to exist comfortably in the space between linear and nonlinear time. She'd also discovered something unexpected. Other people in this universe who were different, enhanced, struggling to find their place. Bashir introduced her to a network of genetically modified individuals living in the Federation's shadows, brilliant minds wasted because of centuries-old prejudice. Ororo began teaching them what Professor Xavier had taught her, that being different wasn't a curse to hide, but a gift to be shared on their own terms. "You're building something," Sisko observed one evening, joining her in the temple where she often meditated. "A movement. A community of the enhanced." "Not a movement," Ororo corrected. "Just a family. People who understand what it means to be powerful and feared, who choose compassion anyway." "Xavier would be proud," Sisko said. Ororo smiled, though sadness touched her eyes. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he'd say I'm doing exactly what I've always done. Protecting people who can't fully protect themselves. Is that why you stayed?" Sisko asked. "To protect people?" "I stayed," Ororo said slowly, "because for the first time in my life, people protected me. You refused to use me. Kira refused to enslave me. Beryl taught me that power and faith could coexist without corruption. This universe showed me what mine never could, that humanity, given the choice, might actually choose compassion over fear. We're not perfect," Sisko cautioned. "Section 31 still operates. The Federation has shadows you haven't seen yet. We'll disappoint you eventually." "Everyone disappoints eventually," Ororo replied, echoing words she'd spoken months ago. "The question is whether you keep trying anyway. And you do. All of you. Despite the war, despite the losses, despite every reason to abandon your principles, you keep trying to be better." Thunder rumbled outside the station, though sensors showed no natural storm systems nearby. Ororo had learned to express emotion through weather without conscious thought, her mutation now as fundamental to her existence as breathing. "The prophets showed me something today," she said quietly. "In the wormhole. A vision of my original universe." Sisko straightened. "Are they offering to send you back?" "They're offering choice," Ororo corrected. "They could open a bridge between universes. I could go home, see my students, rejoin the X-Men. Everything I left behind. But—" Sisko prompted, hearing the hesitation. "But I've changed," Ororo admitted. "The woman who left that universe isn't the woman who would return. I've touched nonlinear existence. I've saved a world that isn't mine. I've learned to exist between possibilities. Going back would mean giving all that up, becoming linear again, pretending I'm who I was instead of who I've become." "So you're choosing to stay," Sisko said. "I'm choosing to exist in both places," Ororo replied, her eyes glowing with that otherworldly light. "The prophets taught me that all separation is illusion. Past, present, future, all exist simultaneously. Why not two universes? Two homes? Two versions of myself, connected across the impossible gap? That sounds complicated," Sisko observed with characteristic understatement. Ororo laughed, genuine and free. "Commander, I manipulate weather across interstellar distances while communing with non-corporeal beings outside time. Complicated is my natural state. She stood, and wind swirled around her. Not threatening, but playful, carrying the scent of Bajoran spring flowers and earth rain simultaneously. The prophets are teaching me to exist in liminal spaces. Between universes. Between linear and nonlinear time. Between goddess and human. Between weapon and protector. Between storm and Ororo. Sisko added. Exactly. She extended her hand, and lightning danced across her palm, not Earth's lightning or Bajor's, but something that belonged to both worlds and neither. I was pulled from one universe to save another. But maybe that's not the end of the story. Maybe it's the beginning of something new, a bridge between realities, built by someone who belongs fully to either but carries both within her. The Federation will want to study this, Sisko warned. The ability to access parallel universes. Let them want, Ororo interrupted gently but firmly. I'm not a research subject, Commander. I'm a person making choices about my own existence. If the Federation can accept that, we'll continue to work together. If not, she shrugged, and the temperature in the temple rose 5 degrees. Well, I've survived persecution before. Sisko smiled. Somehow, I don't think it'll come to that. You have a way of changing perspectives. Like a storm. Ororo agreed. Disrupting the expected. Bringing change whether wanted or not. But also bringing rain after drought. Clearing the air. Making growth possible. She walked to the temple's observation window one last time, looking out at the stars between Bajorans and the wormhole. Somewhere beyond that swirling vortex lay her original universe. And somewhere in this reality lay her new home. Thank you, she said quietly. For seeing me as a person before seeing me as power. For offering choice instead of chains. For teaching me that even in a universe where I don't belong, I can still find belonging. Live long and prosper, Ororo Munroe, Sisko replied, offering the Vulcan salutation with perfect sincerity. And may the wind always be at your back, Benjamin Sisko. Ororo answered, offering the blessing of someone who knew wind intimately. Outside, the Bajoran sky erupted in impossible lightning. Violet and gold and blue, colors that spoke of two universes touching, of possibilities opening, of a storm that had found its purpose not in destruction or salvation alone, but in the simple choice to exist freely between worlds. The storm that walked had found her path. And that path led everywhere and nowhere, to homes she'd left and homes she'd found, to battles fought and peace earned, to the infinite space between what was and what could be. Storm had arrived in the Star Trek universe by accident. But she would remain by choice. And that made all the difference. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories. Thank you for watching.